Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to show you some cool techniques you can do with your Copic markers and your colorless blender solution. And if you don't have the colorless blender solution, don't worry, you can actually use just regular old rubbing alcohol. Copics are alcohol based, and that is why the rubbing alcohol works just like the colorless blender. I do also have this bottle of colorless blender ink right here, so I have a lot to get rid of. That's why I was trying to play around and come up with some of these techniques. So the three main techniques I'm going to show in this video are stamping, using an art syringe, and using a paintbrush. So the first technique is to use a rubber stamp to make cool designs with your colorless blender. So first you need to set up a little container. So I just have a plastic container here, and it's best if you have one with a lid because alcohol does evaporate quickly, but if you're just working quickly then you probably don't need it. And then I put in some rubbing alcohol along with a few layers of paper towel, and the reason you do this is because if you get too much ink on the stamp, it's going to spread too much. Like for example, this one here, it looks cool, but the ink spread a bit too much and I lost the details of the design. And if you use less ink, it goes something like this, which looks a lot cooler. So that's why I put the paper towel in, just so that the stamp doesn't get too wet. So I'm just going to dab the stamp into the paper towel. And if your paper towel is pretty wet, I would not dab it so much, but I put in a lot of paper towel to make sure I don't get too much ink, so that's why I'm dabbing it quite a bit. And then I'm going to press it onto the ink. And you don't want to hold it too long because that's when the ink spreads too much. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now, and you can see it slowly starts to appear, so that's why I didn't want to put too much ink on to start with. And I don't know if it's going to be enough contrast, but it's really hard to stamp down in the same spot twice, so it's kind of some trial and error to see how wet you want your stamp to get and how long you want to hold it down. And I also forgot to mention that I'm layering colors because it looks really cool when you can see other colors coming up in the background. So this design does look really cool. I'm not sure how well it's showing up on camera, but it's nice and subtle. But if you want something a little more noticeable, you can try putting more ink on it. So I'm going to try to do one that's got more ink. I'm also going to hold it down just a little bit longer. And there we go. Again, it takes a few seconds for the colorless blender to really take effect. But it's just a really cool effect you can do in the backgrounds of your drawings. So, or even if it's not a drawing, if it's just some cool scrapbooking thing or whatever you want to do, it's just a really cool technique. So I'm doing one more without a color underneath because sometimes just letting the white of the paper show through is a lot nicer. Well, it won't be 100% white, but it gives a different effect as opposed to layering. And this one actually came out a little bit splotchy, which is actually a cool effect in my opinion. It's pattern plus cool texture, so I'm liking how this one's turning out. So here's a close-up of how these ones turned out. This top one here looks pretty streaky, but that's because I laid down really streaky color. If you lay down smoother color, your design will be smoother, obviously. So now I'm going to move on to the syringe technique. And these are art syringes. Don't worry, they're blunt. You can't stab yourself with it unless you really try to. You're probably going to have a hard time finding these in stores, though, because it's not like you can just go to a pharmacy and pick up some syringes. Like, no. So I had to order mine off eBay, so yes. And this is actually not the needle that came with it. It actually came with this needle, this thick one, but I wanted a thinner one to get smaller blobs of ink, so I ordered a smaller one as well. So I just fill it up with a little bit of my Copic Colorless blender, and then you want to just very gently push down on the end of this. It's actually quite easy to squeeze too hard and get too much ink on the page. And another thing is you want to actually push down on, like touch the paper with the tip of the needle. Otherwise, if you're waiting for the ink, like for there to be enough liquid for it to actually drip off the end of the needle, you're going to get a huge blob. So you might as well just gently squeeze and tap the paper, kind of like this, and you can get different sizes of circles. And this can create a really cool effect for backgrounds in your drawings. I'll bring up a little screenshot of a mermaid picture I did, and I used this technique in the background, and it turned out really cool. You can even do patterns if you want. I would prefer to do this with a paintbrush. That's my next technique, but that's always cool. And if you lay down larger blobs, it really eats into the further layers, because you'll notice with the stamping, it didn't really get down to the lower layers that much, because you need a lot more ink in order to uncover those layers. So as you can see, it's kind of turning purple because it's mixing this reddish color and this blue color. Also, what you need to do is layer the ink, and that way it'll get lighter and lighter. So if I dab in the same spot, let it dry a bit, go back and forth, you can see this is turning out to be a lot lighter than these dots over here. And when I do large areas like this, sometimes I like to dab it because it's a little bit too much at once. If it's taking too long to dry, just dab it with your paper towel and just get back to work. It's a really cool technique, and it adds just really cool effects to your drawings. I don't know what to say. You could use it anywhere in the background, add texture to your character's clothes. Oh my goodness. My sister is sending me Snapchat even though I just told her I was filming. Anyways, I think you get the idea here. This syringe technique's pretty cool. Syringe is hard to find though, so that's why also I'm going to be showing technique with a paintbrush. I just started filming and realized I was not in frame at all. So, moving on to the paintbrush technique. I have a couple different sizes here, and if you want a more uniform circle, you can actually also use Q-tips. I mean, it's not hard to get uniform circles with a paintbrush, but if you have an irregular paintbrush, the Q-tip might work a little bit better for you. So here, just using the paintbrush, just dipping it into some colorless blender. And basically it's the same as the syringe technique, just dabbing. And the more you go over one spot, the more you'll uncover the under layers. And you can just kind of do any design you want, really. It's nice because you actually have more control than with the syringe. So you can get in tighter areas of your drawing, or let's say you want to do something to the background but you don't want to accidentally screw up the character and get this on the character's clothes or something, you can definitely use the paintbrush. So yeah, there's just a lot of different techniques you can do. I have a smaller brush here too for more detail work, smaller blobs. And what I actually like doing too is sometimes going back in and coloring on top with a different color. Ooh, look how this one's turning out. The longer you let it sit and dry, the cooler it looks. Anyway, so I'm taking some of this pink color here and just coloring on top of some of the color I've uncovered. And just get kind of add more color and get cooler effects. Because sometimes you don't get the exact colors you want when you're layering, so you can always go back with your markers and color on top of it as well. So lastly, I'll show the Q-tip. Basically works the same. Just do some blobs. And you can get different sizes depending how hard you push, but I feel like you're limited when you want to get really, really tiny ones. Like this is kind of as small as I can get. So that's the limitation of the Q-tip. If you had a fine a fine brush like I was using before, that would work a little bit better. So yes, I could play around with this all day. It's so fun, but I should probably just end the tutorial here before it gets too long. Oh, one last thing I wanted to mention was just kind of combining these techniques. Like you can stamp, and then you can also add on some dots with your syringe or paintbrush on top just to add some cool effects. Oh, and also instead of using colorless blender, you can actually load your syringe with refill ink from your Copics. Just be careful because like I said, it can make a mess. So yeah, it's just a lot. There's so many different things you can do with this and so many combinations. Like look for items around your house. Honestly, look for things you can use. If you don't have a little paintbrush, look for something you have. Like the possibilities are endless. So yeah, lots you can do with this. Have fun trying this out at home, and thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video.